you. Yeah, even I'm sick of geopolitics. Of course, I've been doing it for 40 years. So, pardon me if you've heard some of this before. So I have 5 bullet points. We hope to get through all 5. The first one is a rebalancing. The second one, after the rebalancing, is fiscal insanity. The third one, after fiscal insanity, is a struggle to the death over institutions. The fourth one is a kind of galvanization. And the fifth one is the global commons. So we'll go through each one of those pieces now. For 15 years at Connexus, and for quite some time before that with another organization, I've been talking about how the costs of the US-led order have been rising, and a rebalancing was coming. And Obama tried in his way, and then first Trump tried, and actually Bush, you could argue, tried, but had the 9/11 episode, and Biden, and here we are now, and the rebalancing is finally underway. The U.S. is 5% of global population, 25% of global GDP, and 50% of global military. Yeah. It's been 25% of global GDP since 1880, almost 150 years. Sure, there have been some years when it was 22% and some years when it was 28%. Very briefly after World War II, it was 50% of global GDP, which is why you got the zero-sum open international order, whose demise some people are lamenting. And it was affordable. And it worked, as you heard from the last panel from our Li Ka-shing professor at the fantastic local, the prestigious National University, Singapore. Europe is 7% of global population, 17% of global GDP, and almost 50% of global social spending. Yeah. How long could that keep going? It went way longer than we thought. Europe has been pocketing $350 billion a year in U.S. security assurance for more than 30 years, spending instead on their quality of life. I would have taken that deal, and they took that deal because the Americans gave them that deal. That deal is no longer affordable by the United States. And so the rebalancing is underway. Everyone's focused on Trump's methods, his behavior, the production of his thumbs. Right? There's an idiosyncrasy to Trump that is mesmerizing. But the rebalancing predates him. Others tried in their polite, eloquent, law school dean Obama kind of way. It didn't work. And here we are. So the U.S. is not in decline. It's still 25% of global GDP. It still has the largest innovation ecosystem on the planet. I live there in Silicon Valley. It still is an energy superpower. There is no country with the energy resources at the prices we're talking about like the U.S. Canada could one day be, and we can all hope. And then soft power, and I could go on. The dimensions and alliance power. Almost 80 treaties with other countries that are voluntary mutual obligation treaties. Who in global history has ever had anything like that before? Nobody. So you have this incredible thing which is still going, but the costs of the order that it instituted after World War II have skyrocketed because Germany is no longer the 3rd largest economy in the world. Those days are long over. Japan is no longer the 2nd largest economy in the world. the U.S. allies have declined in proportion to global GDP. These are just basic empirical facts. Not only have they declined in proportion to global GDP, but their demographics are terrible. So they can't afford the bender that they've been on either. Yeah. So this is a massive rebalancing, which is long overdue, and it doesn't surprise me because I've been talking about it for 15 years. It connects us along. And Trump is this bizarre instrument of history that he doesn't fully understand. But here it is. It's spectacular. In addition to the allies not contributing to the same degree and going on this quality of life social spending bender that the U.S. is subsidizing, again, it was a U.S. choice to do this. Can't blame the Europeans if the U.S. was going to do this. Well, you could, I guess. The other thing is that the adversaries are now successes. They have very significant proportion of global GDP compared to where they were 30 years ago. And unlike the Europeans, they spend on their militaries. Russia has a minuscule economy in global terms and has a colossal military budget because it overinvests in repression and the military. It's the opposite of Germany. Germany's army resembles Costa Rica. And of course, China, you all know. So, given that the costs have gone up both on the friend side and the adversary side, how was this going to continue? It wasn't going to continue. And so it took something crazy out of the social media, reality television, real estate, pro wrestling, beauty pageant side of America that you maybe didn't know as well, and you know all too well now. You've been exposed to it. It's been there the whole time, but we've been exposed to it more because of the social media phenomenon. So the rebalancing is going to continue. This is not about America retreating from the world. This is not about America giving up its role in the world. All of that is social media rubbish. This is about a rebalancing of the costs and benefits. And it's happening, and it's a mess, and Trump's version of it is going to maybe even fail to produce a new equilibrium. But it's going to break the current equilibrium that needed to be broken. So again, he's an unwitting instrument of history. And I've been waiting to see it happen sort of normally. And it never happened normally, and now it's happening abnormally. So I'm not mesmerized by the social media. I'm not mesmerized by the tweeting. I'm not mesmerized by the bragging, the boasting, the musking, all of that stuff. I'm focused on the rebalancing and what could be the next equilibrium and how we might get there. And so this is a positive story. Something was unaffordable, couldn't continue, and there's a rebalancing underway, and it's going to be very difficult to get from point A to point B, but that's the journey that we're finally on. And all of that Biden and Obama and all of that rubbish that came along and couldn't deal with this. There's an unlimited demand for American power. And there's not an unlimited supply. So, Ukraine into NATO. That's another demand on American power. A security treaty with the Saudis. That's another demand on American power. It's just endless demands on more. Solve this, do that, get here. Okay, you're barbarians, but don't abandon us to our fate, you barbarians. Right? That's the discourse in Europe now. Okay, so here we are. Again, America, we are barbarians. It's true. But there's this unlimited demand for American power. Every American embassy abroad has two things. I say this every speech. One, an anti-American protest, which is large and justified. And the other, the longest line for visas you've ever seen. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. That's American power. There's never enough, and yet there seems to be too much. But there's not too much. Okay, that's the first point, the rebalancing. Thank God. I'm not very particularly fond of President Trump. He wouldn't be my ideal leader. Let's just put it that way, but nonetheless, the process is underway. The second thing is the fiscal insanity. So when I started, just a little bit before I started with Colin and Amanda, the budget of the United States of America was about $4.5 trillion at the federal level, which was a huge number. This is under Bush. About $4.5 trillion, $4.6 trillion. Right? Under Biden, it was $7.6 trillion. In a single generation, it went from 4.6 to 7.6 trillion. I mean, seriously? Where was that going to come from? Who thought that that was possible? Again, the Iraq War fiasco on Bush, the global financial crisis, which we caused, but then we fixed, because the Federal Reserve is your single real global institution. You don't have any others. And then, of course, besides the global financial crisis, the COVID stuff, and then the insanity of the green transition to nowhere. It used to be every conversation was about the energy transition. Now it's all about geopolitics. I used to be the geopolitical interlude at the sustainability conversations. Remember? There would be one crazy guy would get up and talk geopolitics and depress everybody, and the rest of it was about a green transition and climate change. And yeah, okay. Yeah, Colin, you were there, dude. All right. So the fiscal insanity, no, it can't, forget it. It's just too much. It cannot go on like this. In a single generation, to go from $4.6 to $7.6 trillion federal budget, I don't know how much economic growth you're going to generate or how much inflation you're going to use to pay that off. And remember, when it started, interest rates, you needed a microscope to see them. And now interest rates are normal again. And so we now spend in the United States more on interest payments than on our global military. Yeah, that's not going to work. And if that continues indefinitely, you'd say, geez, how could that continue indefinitely? Well, it can't. It had to stop. And so lo and behold, it's Trump again. Now, is Trump going to fix the fiscal insanity? This is the 7th bankruptcy. He had 6 in the private sector. This is the 7th. This time, he's going to walk, and the country's going to be bankrupt. Right? The previous time, the creditors were left holding the bag when he walked. It's the 7th bankruptcy. But it's necessary. There needs to be a fiscal realignment. The fiscal insanity can't go on anymore. No more. So Musk and cut this and cut that, and they go after the stuff that's defenseless. Right? USAID. By the way, USAID refused to report to the Secretary of State what it was doing. They hid it from the Secretary of State. It's a State Department agency. So they set themselves up for this. And there are a lot of victims who are undeserving of victimhood in the process. But then there are some victims who had it coming. But that's just the easy. Right? Let's see what they do with Social Security, with Medicare, and with Medicaid. Medicare, which is the largest expense, the health care for almost half the population. Almost half the population. It's huge expense 40% of it is last year of life. That's where the money's going. It's the baby boomers hanging on for another couple of months in intensive care beds. Yeah. Until they're all in the grave, what do? Last year of life. Can we do 2 more months? Can we do 4 more months? I've always said that if I could only own an intensive care bed in a hospital and derive the revenues from it, I would never have to work another day in my life. Because there are so many boomers. I mean, my God, such a gigantic population. So the fiscal insanity, Trump, again, he won't fix it. He's an unwitting instrument here. They're going after the small stuff. They haven't gone after the big stuff. They have no idea what they're doing. They're lying. They're covering things up. But they're also revealing a lot about where the money goes, which was very hard to see. And so Musk, for all his South African, Afrikaans nationalism, is again another unwitting instrument of history. Okay, so that's the fiscal insanity, and I could talk at great length about that. Some of the things that they revealed, just mind-blowing, of where money has been going. All right, my third point was about the struggle to the death over institutions. So also this was, you could see this coming. In fact, we talked about this also. It connects us many times over the years. The left went on an ideological jihad to conquer American institutions. Not just Hollywood and universities and media, but the corporate world, the whole shebang. And it was quite extremist, and it bothered normal Americans. And Trump comes along, and he's the instrument to try to stop the madness of the leftist revolution, radical revolution to conquer American institutions. I was a witness to this, and I'm on the receiving end of it. And so now the counter-revolution to reconquer the same institutions, but from the right, the hard right perspective. So it's very interesting. They're having a struggle to the death over the institutions. So the institutions must matter. Tells you everything you need to know. Both sides trying to conquer the institutions. There must be something worth having. Now again, the leftist surge in institutional terms didn't please me very much, but the counter-revolution doesn't do much for me either. I'm one of those people who thinks that common sense is important. What we call the low information voter. Those are people who are not on social media, don't watch cable television, don't read newspapers, and they're commonsensical and they vote. And they brought Trump to end the madness, and now Trump is the opposite end of the spectrum madness. It's gotten to the point where he's going after the judges because they're liberal and were appointed by Obama or Clinton. Right? In other words, the justification for going after rule of law is that the rule of law was captured by the left. That's a partially true, half-true, and therefore mostly false analysis. But you can see where the justification could come from. And so the left is going to lose, and the right is going to lose, and the institutions are going to win. Because that's what happens in America again and again and again. It's going to be a mess. And people are going to go hysterical, even more than they're hysterical now. Let's just take one thing, abortion. All the craziness about abortion that you've been hearing. So Roe versus Wade, which found a constitutional right to abortion that doesn't exist, was considered bad jurisprudence by most of the legal profession, including by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who criticized Roe versus Wade as bad jurisprudence. Yes, she did. Oh, yeah. Facts that are easily findable if you're looking for them. The Democrats, for decades, had very significant majorities in the House and the Senate to pass any federal abortion law they wanted. And they didn't. How stupid is that? They controlled enough of the Senate to override the filibuster, supermajorities in some cases, and they did nothing. And then, of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had cancer. She refused to step down. She died in office. She was replaced by a conservative. They repealed Roe versus Wade, and there's no more abortion in the United States, right? Abortion is up. Yeah, abortions are up since Roe versus Wade was repealed. What do you know? Again, these inconvenient facts. Because Roe versus Wade, all it did was return abortion from the federal courts to the state legislatures. And state legislatures could decide, and every single state where there was a referendum to make abortion legal or illegal, some of which Trump won by 30-plus points, voted to retain abortion. Because almost 3/4 of the American population is in favor of abortion with restrictions. So returning abortion to the states means you're returning it to a solid majority that's only growing. So that was the end of abortion. Again, this fight, this struggle for the institutions, hard left against hard right. America is a 30-30-40 country. 30% left, 30% right, 40% neither. Neither. Yeah, and that's the 40% that's not represented in this. Okay. So anyway, so we have this struggle to the death over, it's going to get ugly. It's going to get very ugly. Trump with the courts and ignoring the court orders and the constitutional crisis, and the Wall Street Journal, the bastion of conservatism, is after Trump for ignoring the rule of law. So you know it's going to get ugly. And we're just, who knows what's coming. Okay. Fourth point, the galvanizing, the galvanization. Lo and behold, Trump did what nobody else could do. Putin couldn't even do this. He galvanized the Europeans. Amazing. And now the Europeans are having these crisis meetings about what to do. 17% of global GDP. Can they protect themselves? I mean, I think they could. There are countries with a lot less than 17% of global GDP, like Russia, with 2%, that have a military. So I could do a lot with 17%. Remember, the Swedes have an army and an air force. Why? Why do the Swedes have an army and an air force? They were not in NATO. They had no choice. Why do the Finns have a land army? They were not in NATO. They had no choice. So can the Europeans do this? Well, yeah. Will they do it now? We'll see. The demographics don't work for the social spending, plus the geopolitics, as we've been hearing, and I could go on. So now Europe is going to grow up in the world in which we live, as opposed to the world it was inhabiting, that cocoon, with 7% of global population and 40-something% of global social spending. I mean, seriously? Wow. Okay. So, Canada. How long has Canada been in the doldrums? And now Canada's going to stand tall. Trump has galvanized Canada. I mean, he revived the zombie who's the Prime Minister of Australia, who's back through the roof again. A little bit of cyclone, a little bit of Trump, which is also a cyclone, and boom. It turns out that now Labour is back in Australia. They were in the tank not that long ago. And the Liberals and the left in Canada, we'll see what happens in the UK. I mean, those Labourites in the UK, I mean, man, they give incompetence a sort of bad reputation. They do. But who knows? Maybe Trump can revive them as well. That would be something special if he pulled that one off. but galvanizing everybody and anybody, all the middle powers, which have tremendous power and always have had and are now going to do something about it. Okay, so this galvanization, long overdue, is fantastic. Again, does Trump understand that he's doing this? Does he understand that he revived Trudeau's party in Canada with the idiocy of the 51st state that will never happen? No. Of course he doesn't understand that. But is it a potentially really good thing? Certainly. Beyond doubt. It's a really good thing for America, too, if Canada stands up. Canada has so much vaster potential than it's realized so far. And we'd love to see it. It's to America's benefit that Australia is booming, that Canada is booming, that the UK somehow is revived. I'm less optimistic about that. Okay, and I could go on this galvanization. So rebalancing that needed to happen and is finally going to happen. Fiscal insanity that couldn't continue but is continuing under Trump. And so where that new equilibrium is going to come from is still mysterious. Right? The struggle to the death over the institutions, which is going to be uglier than it even is already, but is going to be a positive outcome because the institutions in America always win. And then this galvanization globally. I mean, who wouldn't ask for all of these four things? I've been asking for them forever. And I got them. Okay. I got a version of them, a messy version of them, a perverse and unintended consequences version of them. But then again, I study history, and that's how history works. Now, here's my fifth one, which is less positive. I'm almost done, Colin. Global commons. Global commons. Everything you do, you're free riding on the global commons. You don't pay for it. It's not part of your cost structure, but it's a colossal part of your revenue structure, the global commons. The global commons is what some people are calling the US-led international order, the rules-based order. It's the fact that you can sail a ship on the sea and have your stuff on it and get it delivered. It's the fact that you have undersea cables, 82% of which were built by the US and its allies, and about 18% built by Huawei Marine. I don't know what Huawei Marine is now called. They've undergone so many name changes, I haven't kept up. But the global communications system, on the water, under the water, above, in the atmosphere, you hear the cloud? There's no such thing as the cloud. The cloud doesn't exist. The internet is in the ocean. It's not, there's no cloud. It's the ocean, dude. It's in the ocean. Yeah, that's the global commons. People talk about a BRICS currency. Yeah, go right ahead. Who's stopping you? Go right ahead. Form a BRICS currency and let's see how it works. If it was doable, it would have been done long ago. You're going to miss the dollar if it goes. You're going to miss the Federal Reserve if it goes. Because that's all you got. You don't have anything else. You lose the global commons, you can't do what you do. It's gone. You don't have an interconnected world where you can move money in fractions of a millisecond. Somebody could take that away from you. Somebody could take away the lender of last resort, the backup to the system. You don't like the dollar? Fine. Use something else. And then the first hint of trouble, I'm going to see what you're going to do. Like every single time. The first hint of trouble. Why don't you have only euros? Why don't you have just yen? How big are your holdings in yuan? You got dirhams and rupees? Go ahead. Who's stopping you? You can load up on as many of them as you want. Nobody's forcing you to use the international financial system as currently configured. You're using it because you don't have anything better. And if they take it away, yeah, they take it away, then what? Global commons, that's what's at risk. You want to talk about a multipolar world and all the other cable television expressions? It's fine. You want a multipolar world? Go right ahead. What are you going to do with the global commons, though? You know the 7th Fleet, the 5th Fleet? What are you going to do for them? What are you going to do for the 5th Fleet? U.S. and China go to war? Yeah, U.S. and China go to war. What do you think is going to happen? Every oil tanker in the Strait of Malacca is going to blow. And that's not going to be navigable anymore. And you're going to see an oil slick like you've never seen before. You want to talk about environment, atmosphere, carbon? Yeah, U.S. and China go to war. The Straits of Malacca is an ink well. It's just black. And you can't navigate it because everything is sunk there. Persian Gulf, yeah, same thing. Those gas pipelines in northern Russia that go to Asia, they're going to burn. They're going to burn. All of them are going to burn. They're going to be sabotaged. Who's going to let gas go to China? Seriously, you think that's going to continue? No, it's going to burn. You want to know what the environment's going to look like in that catastrophic scenario? Perpetually burning national gas at 38 billion cubic meters. Yeah. Whew. Again and again and again, you're going to lose all the pieces of the global commons that you take for granted. I don't think we want that world. I certainly don't want that world. I understand that only Americans elect the president. And by the way, 30% elect. 30% elect with a 49.8% non-majority. And 40% don't vote, and the other 30% vote against. And the rest of the world doesn't vote at all. That's always been the flaw of the US-led order. You don't get to choose who runs it on your behalf. And so people chafe under that. Everybody wants to have a say, a voice. Who wants some low-information voter in some Pennsylvania rural county to be deciding who's going to be the leader of your global order? Nobody wants that, but that's what you got. Fine. What's better? What do you got that's better? You're going to see BRICS currency? Okay. Where are you going to get the tech transfer in the FDI? Where do the BRICS countries get the tech transfer in the FDI from now? They don't get it. They don't have it. They don't get it. They can't give it to each other. And if they do have it, in the case of China, they're not giving it to the others, except surveillance technology. They'll give that because then they control their communications networks. So yeah, what are you going to do for tech transfer and FDI in a BRICS world? You could talk multipolar world. Go right ahead. I mean, nobody's stopping you. But what are you substituting it for? Where's your global commons? Tech transfer, FDI, and I could go on. When Europe, in the global financial crisis, Europe asked the Federal Reserve for drawing rights. There's no statute in the United States that enables the Federal Reserve to backstop the European banking system. It doesn't exist. Not part of the mandate. And the Fed said yes. The Europeans felt that their banking system might go under without the Federal Reserve backstop. Those are the Europeans. We're not talking yet about Malaysia, Brunei, Singapore, Philippines, where we are right now. So I just wonder about the loose talk about these things. Again, if I had a choice, would I create things the way they are? Are things just? Is it an ideal order? Does everybody have a say? No, the answer is no to all of those questions. But you tell me what you got better that provides for the global commons. And then maybe I'll take it if you can show me what's better. You heard Professor Kwa when he was asked, about the Chinese-led order and whether that was seen as an opportunity going forward for Singapore. And his answer was complicated as it needed to be, but it wasn't a yes. All right. Well, if not, then what else, huh? Yeah, this. And so the Trump stuff, again, this is where we'll conclude. It couldn't look crazier, right? And it's very hard to understand. It's very confusing. And Trump doesn't really know what he's doing. There is no secret here. There's no conspiracy. There's no multi-move thing. I'll conclude with the Panama stuff. I could do Greenland, I could do all of them, but I'll just do the Panama one. So Panama was part of BRI. And the American administrations didn't like that. They didn't like Panama, where we built the canal, being a part of the Chinese BRI. And they said, we don't like this. Can you do something about it? And Panama said, no. We'll go flip the bird. No. And so Trump comes along and says, well, okay, we'll take the canal back. And within weeks, Panama, they're selling the 2 Hong Kong ports on either side of the canal to an American company and ending their participation in BRI. And in fact, it's Li Ka-shing. We have the Li Ka-shing professor, Professor Kwa. Li Ka-shing owned those ports. And he sold them without even consulting with Beijing to get his money out. And now Beijing is trying to undo the deal of the sale of those ports owned by the Li Ka-shing conglomerate, the Hong Kong-based conglomerate. So Trump got China out of Panama. Yeah, that's what this is about. Is Trump wanting to take the canal back? Probably. But in the meantime, he did something which American presidents were desperate to do and couldn't figure out how to do. And now he's trying to reorient the whole global trade order to disadvantage China. And the countries can either disadvantage China along with the U.S.'s attempt to disadvantage China, or they can be on the receiving end. That's what's going on with Trump. They sit there in the White House and they say, you know, China took advantage of our system. We were stupid to allow that. We're going to fix that, but we can't fix it just ourselves. We're going to make everybody do that. It's kind of a crazy idea. And it's underway, and step by step, we're seeing pieces of it happen. Amazing that Trump could do this. Does he fully understand this? Is he using methods that sort of look nice and clean and friendly? And no, he's doing it in Trumpian fashion. But enough already with the order that we built, which the Chinese cleverly, brilliantly, you could say, bent it to their advantage. Using the rules when it suited them, not using the rules when it didn't suit them. So WTO is dead. That's over. That epoch is dead. It's not coming back. It never should have happened in the first place. The GATT was fine. The GATT was totally fine, and something like the GATT will be a new equilibrium in the future. When? I have no idea. How? Messy. Global Agreements on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, G-A-T-T, predated WTO. Okay, anyway, final point then. So there's a lot to be optimistic about in this insanity of Trump and chaos and unpleasantness. And he's a nasty piece of work. Yeah, that's who he is. He's cruel. He's roiling resentment like Musk. It's not pretty, but he's an instrument of processes that are bigger than him. It's going to come out the other side. There's no alternative to the U.S.-led order except loss of the global commons. Yeah, that's the alternative. That's what we had before the U.S.-led order. So the rebalancing is making a lot of people angry, but it's also galvanizing them in very positive ways. The idea that U.S. is losing Europe or Europe is losing is just bunk. What a bunch of bunk. Do you have any idea what the trade volume is? What the tech transfer is? What the FDI is? Let alone the cultural ties. Do you think that's going away because Trump is going to be in the White House for a few years? No. None of that's going to go away. It's just going to come out the other side with a different balance, a different equilibrium. And you have to live today. I get to live in these long structural trends. I get to live outside the conjuncture. Plus, I don't have a portfolio. I don't have any money. Thank you.
Okay, where should we start?
That wasn't enough? Maybe that was too much.
Well, I think, there's no doubt, Stephen, you're having your moment in the sun. You've been talking about this stuff for 40 years, as you say. This could be the crescendo.
I think we're still in the middle.
Exactly. So let's work backwards from this point.
Okay.
In 4 years, or a little under, Trump will be out of office. What then?
I think in less than 4 years, there's going to be an election in the United States, our so-called midterms, when the president is not at stake, the presidency is not at stake, but part of the Senate and all of the House is at stake. The American public did not vote for this. They didn't vote for stagflation. They didn't vote for economic uncertainty. They voted for the opposite. They were trying to punish the Democrats for the inflation, the overregulation. And so it could well be that the voters punish the Republicans for what Trump is causing. That depends on having something when you go into the voting booth that is a punishment instrument against the other side. So Trump was that instrument to punish the Democrats. Deservedly so, they got the punishment, but Trump was the instrument. I think they would have preferred a different or a better instrument, but they had Trump. What's on offer from the Democrats for the population to punish the Republicans? So we'll have to wait to see. But that rubbish is not doing well right now. So they have to rise to the occasion and offer a coherent alternative to what Trump is doing. And there's a struggle for the soul of the Democratic Party between two failed options over the past several years. And we'll see how that comes out. But you know from Australian politics, right, that things can be revived, things that look hopeless can come around again, that political entrepreneurialism is possible, that politicians with skills can remember those skills, like Albo did with the cyclone response. So it's quite possible the Democrats can get their act together, get their mojo together, get some leadership, get some type of coherent vision, and therefore offer the electorate an ability to punish Trump midterm. J.D. Vance is trying to clear the field of all Republican primary contenders. Why is J.D. Vance more MAGA than the MAGA? He wants to slay them all before 2028 so that he is the anointed successor. You think that's going to work? We'll see. I'm a little bit skeptical. It would take really quite something special from J.D. Vance, and I haven't seen it yet. So the renewal, the corrective mechanisms, the possibilities within the system, those didn't go away. They're all still there to be activated by the political entrepreneurialism that's like oxygen. So I can see a good outcome where Trump gets punished, this passes, and somebody comes in to help establish a new equilibrium that makes sense for Americans and for allies, partners, and friends.
So we're going to come to a piece here, not only with the questions from the floor, but what does this mean to institutional investors? And you're a historian and a geopolitical expert, so not an investor, to be clear, and you're quite poor, as you point out. But with all seriousness, we want to come to your questions. We also want to bring this to an end. Well, what does all this information mean from the investor perspective and for portfolios? But just before we get there...
that's your room.
Just before we get there, so these guys are going to tell us what it all means, right? But a couple of things that I just want to interrogate.
Yeah.
nothing that you just said is that hard to, nothing you just said is easy to argue with, I would suggest. What you've just laid out there in that extraordinary 40 minutes. But there are some interesting things that are quite distinct that you've been talking about for years,
okay,
that I'd like you to kind of give us some comfort around or justify. You've said the institutions during Trump 1 held up and would hold up.
Well, that's an empirical statement during Trump 1. It's a guess.
Yes, but if you were to look today at the court systems, if you were to look today at the FBI and various other institutions, you'd have to question whether the wholesomeness of those organisations will hold up through this term of Trump. That's question number one. The other part to this, which seems ridiculous and not necessary for everything you've just laid out, is to side with Putin on Ukraine, and you're the Russian expert, but to do that and undermine the global world order and undermine democracy, which America's helped build and maintain, seems completely beyond unacceptable and unnecessary.
Maybe. I mean, I've been an advocate for support of Ukraine from the beginning, but not an illusory, self-delusional advocate of what was possible vis-a-vis Ukraine. So you're sitting in the White House, and they come to you and they tell you all the things that China and Russia are doing, so-called gray zone tactics, infiltrating your infrastructure, planting malware in your electricity grid, in your water supply, exfiltrating all of your personnel files and proprietary data, setting fire to IKEA warehouses in European countries, and I could go on, right? That's what the briefing that you're getting. And you're sitting there saying, you know, we have a problem. We have these two countries that are aligned with each other and that are arrayed against us, and our friends are not helping. You know, when the Biden administration, pro-transatlanticism, went to Europe and said, geez, if we go to war with China, are you in? What'd they say?
No way.
That's right. They said, that's your war. We're not getting dragged into that. So the U.S. is the guarantor of European security vis-a-vis Russia, but the Europeans are not all in for the U.S. in the Indo-Pacific? Like, what's that about? The Pentagon Doctrine previously was, not that long ago, this was under Bush, was 2 major wars in 2 major theaters simultaneously. Under Obama, that was reduced to 1.5 major wars and 1.5 major theaters. Have you ever seen a 0.5 major war? Have you ever seen a 0.5 major theater? And then Trump finished the job, and he reduced the 1.5 to 1. So official Pentagon doctrine is 1 major war in 1 major theater at any given time. Is that what U.S. commitments look like? We're committed in Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia. We're committed up to our necks in 3 theaters simultaneously. But our doctrine is 1, and our commitments are 3. So you're thinking, I can't go up against all of these adversaries simultaneously. So I have to somehow reduce that. And so the idea, is it going to work? I don't think so. But the idea is, well, if we bring Russia back on side and they're no longer incentivized to spoliation without, as far as the eye can see, and they maybe don't cooperate as much with China, we can manage China better. Sure, Russia's not going to break with China, but maybe we could reduce the animosity vis-a-vis Russia. And what are the Europeans, whom we're so supposedly abandoning, what are they contributing to this? And so you can't be enemies with all the powers that have the largest militaries forever. North Korea has 60 nuclear weapons now. Like, whose problem is that? It's not Singapore's problem. It's not Australia's problem. Guess that's Trump's problem. So those are the briefings that you're getting. And it looks like a nasty piece of work. Abandoning Ukraine to its fate. Siding with President Putin. And clearly Trump's constitution, his personal preferences are more like Putin.
So what do you think Xi Jinping is thinking all through this, the last 3 months, 4 months?
He's as befuddled as everyone in this room is, as you are, as I, as everybody looking at Trump, because Trump doesn't know where Trump is going with this. And so it's very interesting to watch China vis-a-vis the U.S. You know, when I talk about U.S. power and its multiple dimensions, those are the briefings that Xi Jinping gets. When Trump does tariffs against China, he does something, whether it's tariffs or something else, what does China do? Does it go tit for tat against America? Never does. It goes after Australia. It goes after Canada. It goes after South Korea. It goes after the vulnerable allies of the U.S. that are smaller and tries to isolate them and hurt them in getting back at the U.S. Doesn't go up against the U.S. because you want to know something? That hasn't worked well in history. You can ask Nazi Germany how that worked. You can ask Hirohito's Japan how that worked. You can ask the Soviet Union how that worked. And you can ask Deng Xiaoping how it worked to be partners with the U.S. as opposed to opposition to the U.S. So I have no idea what Xi Jinping is thinking.
Okay,
no idea. But one man is making a $100 trillion decision about everything and anything. One guy has the power to do that. The global economy is $100 trillion, more or less. And he can go to war with the U.S. if he so decides. What kind of world did we get ourselves into that one man can make that decision? And that's the world that you're living in, and now those are your portfolios, and I don't know what he's thinking because the system is opaque. He doesn't tell us how decisions are rendered there, and even the people in the second echelon in China don't know what the hell is going on there. And Xi Jinping doesn't live with them. He doesn't live in Zhongnanhai. He lives by himself in the Western Hills.
Okay, so we only have another 4 hours of this session to go. So I want to go now. I want to go to the room and find questions. Patrick, please introduce yourself. Grab the microphone from the middle of the table, and we're going to be fortunate to hear from this gentleman next, in fact, Patrick Seifel, Chief Economist of Pictet from Switzerland. Just press the right-hand side.
Sure.
There you go. There you go. Thank you.
So I'm just, it's practicing in the voice. No, thanks very much, Stephen, as always. Fascinating, very provocative as well. But I have two questions. The first one is, if you look back in history, US had 100 years of trade surpluses.
Yes.
80-70, 90-70.
Yes.
Essentially exporting its overcapacity in industrial production, manufacturing.
Yes.
Essentially for 50 years with high tariffs. We've been through 70 years of reverse history. Is it really unfair, to have they just pay back what they got for 100 years? That's the first.
Okay.
The second would be regarding what you were saying as being a cost for the Fed to provide the US dollar during the period of global financial crisis. I mean, that's the price to pay when you are the dominant currency. But you have privilege with that. You have, you can easily finance your deficits at a lower rate, and there's many other privileges. So again, is that considered to be unfair, or is it just the price to pay for other privilege that you have?
Yes. So the U.S. is the main beneficiary of the U.S.-led order. It was the main beneficiary before there was a U.S.-led order. It's rewriting the terms. And it has the power to do so. And whether it's fair or unfair, that's it now. That's the world you're in now. The U.S. created the terms and benefited from them, and now the terms are not as favorable to the U.S. and the U.S. perception. It's going to rewrite the terms because it can. And whether that's fair or unfair, whether the U.S. had 100 years of this and now 50 years of that, those are the kinds of judgments that those on the receiving end can make about the U.S. But the U.S. feels and it's widespread, it's not just Trump, it's well beyond Trump, that the terms of global engagement need to be rewritten.
However, Stephen, you did say
That's
earlier
it.
it was 5% of the population. So do you not think, with 5% of the population representing that scenario, the 95% that's experiencing the flip side of that scenario, that can break global agreements, allies, and piss a lot of the world off, and frankly, it occurs as arrogance and oppression for many. How does America reconcile that part of what you just said?
Yeah, Colin, where were you in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s? Like, was there some America that's now obvious, revealed itself that wasn't there then? I mean, there was the Vietnam War. What was that about? Was that the rules-based order? It was atrocities. And the U.S. lost that war, deservedly so, right? So I have to tell you, if you, 95%, can do better, what's stopping you? Go ahead and make a better world. Go ahead and organize the world better, and we'll all benefit from that. But if you can't do that, then your option is, as you heard from our Li Ka-shing Professor Kwa, your option is to manage U.S. power the best that you can so that you can derive the benefits and hedge against some of the costs. So is it fair? Is it unfair? I mean, those are reasonable questions. Those are normal questions. But my question is, go ahead and do better. And if you can't do better, then maybe you should be careful about getting rid of something or trying to get rid of something that you don't have a better alternative. I'm not a proponent of the U.S.-led order because it's fair and just and because it's wonderful and the U.S. is just never hypocritical. And I'm a proponent of it because I don't see anything that's better. But if something better comes along, I mean, okay, matrimony, generally speaking, you're supposed to be married for life and not supposed to have the roving eye and look for a better international system, you know, every time you walk into a room. But go ahead.
Okay, we have more questions here. Wow, many questions. So we've got 4, I think. So Andrew, first of all, represents Australian Retirement Trust, second largest pension plan in Australia, over $300 billion. Go ahead, Andrew.
So I'll ask the question very quickly, which is where does Japan, because we've spoken a lot about US, Europe, and less about Asia to some extent, which is hard because it just captures you, but where does Japan fit into the rebalancing, particularly given their somewhat unique relationship with the US from a demilitarization perspective?
Yes.
Can I get a
Great
variety of
question.
questions and you can do them all at once?
Try.
Okay, the lady here on the second table, name and organisation. 2 gentlemen on the next table.
Hi, Weiling, CDPQ, Canadian Pension Fund from Quebec. You know, Stephen, you talk about light at the end of the tunnel, so that, you know, in theory, at the end of this tunnel, whether it's Europe, whether it's Asia, we should all end up, you know, to be positive. Now, but really, you know, for all of us in the financial markets, you know, in the long run, we're all dead. So honestly, what is a very likely scenario, you know, within the terms, you know, of Trump?
Thank you.
Okay, great question. On the next table, Rest Super, also 2.2 million members represented in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. I like the point you raised about voters going to the polls to punish. There's a developing view, just trying to bring this back to portfolios and investing. There's a developing view that Trump almost wants to cause a mild recession and then lead into a recovery going into midterms. How do you think about that? Is that a reasonable hypothesis?
Thank you very much. There's another question, I think, on that table. There's another hand I saw. Last chance. Anyone else in the room? I thought there was a 4th person. Is it this gentleman? Okay.
Yeah. Terry Bird from NGS Super in Australia. Stephen, your treatise is largely leadership of destruction at the moment. What does leadership of a more positive, creative character look like in terms of changing the world order, but without the collateral damage that we seem to be experiencing at the moment?
Very good. All those questions. Okay, well, this lady here, last one. Lucky last.
We're over time here, Colin, and you're getting me. This is now the 5th question.
I know you're going to have to answer them all in 3 minutes together, wrapped up together in a bow. Just press the right-hand side. Yes, and your name and organisation.
I'm Yue from Australian Super.
Oh, wow. It's lots of Australians here. Hello. Welcome.
Front and center. So you talk about Trump as an unwilling tool of the history, but the changes of this U.S.-led order is not sustainable. But I would like to talk about also. It seems like internally in the U.S. there is an unsustainability of the system, and how is that going to influence the 5% of the population and the 1.5% who voted for him, and how it's going to change?
Thank you. All great questions. And for those who don't know Australian Super, our largest pension plan in Australia, about $350 billion. Okay, Stephen, wrap it up. Thank you.
I'm not that brief, generally speaking, and these are all really good questions. I did a war games in Australia, what was that, 8 years ago, 7 years ago? And the point of the game, which everybody failed in the room, was middle powers deepening horizontal relationships. So there was a Japan table, and nobody from the Australia table walked over to the Japan table. It was all about what's the U.S. going to do? What can we expect from U.S. behavior? What's the new U.S. administration going to do? And my point was, there's no substitute for a deep and abiding treaty relationship with the U.S., but there is the possibility, which nobody's preventing you, of having deeper horizontal relationships with any countries of your choice, including Japan. And as I said, not a single Australian, those were all fantastic people. They were in high leadership positions, very impressive, successful people, and they didn't get the world they were living in. And they get it now, and it's not too late. So Japan is a fantastic relationship. I was just in the Philippines. I flew from Manila here. You don't have to tell them how important Japan is to them. And one could go on with this. Okay, in the long run, we're all dead. What are we going to do in the short run? In the short run, we're all dead. I give the lecture called In the Short Run, We're All Dead. You see, in the long run, we're all good because our system is superior. It has corrective mechanisms. It can go through convulsions, and it's not existential. We can come out the other side. It's in the short run that we have this problem that we're all dead, which is U.S.-China major war. That happens, as I said, your global environment, your portfolios, it just all is incinerated. Global commons, forget it. So it's prolonging the short run to make it the long run. That's the geopolitical game. No decision, major war between the U.S. and China. There's a lot of bad stuff going on. We didn't talk about Yemen. We didn't talk about Syria, Afghanistan. That's all Asia too, by the way. Why is the future Asia? That's all Asia too. We haven't talked about that. All that's bad, but that's not existential for the planet the way a U.S.-China war is. So it's in the short run we're all dead, and managing the short run by avoiding a U.S.-China major war. That's the game. If we can do that, we can survive Trump. On cause a recession, lead to recovery going into a midterm. That's a great, if only Trump were that smart. He's likely to cause the recession. It's the recovery that's the problem in that scenario. We could end up with stagflation as far as the eye can see. And there's, Trump, there's no three-bank shot. You pool where you got to hit three sides before you can go into the pocket. That's not Trump. Trump is all thumbs, literally, and it's news cycle stuff. Nothing strategic at all. I know the people who work for him. I had a chance myself. Of course, I didn't. A leader of destruction, collateral damage. Yeah, this is creative destruction. Remember that Econ 101 class you took back in college? Way, way back when, like 5 years ago? Yeah. This is creative destruction, part of intentional, because Trump is just an angry SOB. and resents everyone and everything. He's going after people that he perceives as enemies. The FBI. The FBI was not a highly efficient organization, and it required reform. And instead of getting reform, it's getting Trump. It's going to come out the other side, though, and hopefully it's going to come out better because it was not in great shape. Finally, internally in the U.S., best question of all, fifth and final question. The U.S. has experienced episodes of populism since its founding. It's just normal for the U.S. This is not abnormal. What's abnormal is the fact that the U.S. leads the international order and is having these internal convulsions. You want to understand Trump? H.W. Brand's biography of Andrew Jackson. My God, Trump is nowhere near as crazy as Andrew Jackson was. Andrew Jackson was president in the early part of the 19th century. So there's stuff happening in America now that's recognizable. Good or bad, right? You like it, you don't like it. You're against the populism, you're establishmentarian, you don't like the collateral damage on friends and allies, and I don't like any of it either. And I've been a voice against it. But this is America. The indigenous American berserk, Philip Roth. Anyway, thank you. I'm done.